I'm sure all of you are aware, WWE has been trash lately. Well, at least Monday Night Raw has. But you know what? I'm willing to put that aside for the moment because they have a draft coming up where they'll be selecting the different superstars that are currently part of one brand and switching them to another one. Of course, occasionally they do this randomly throughout the year and play it off as a trade between the two brands. Mainly just Raw and SmackDown. NXT, of course, won't be included in this draft. Like, they're not going to get main roster stars and everything else. But either way, I do sometimes enjoy these drafts because it allows them to shake things up and gives them the opportunity to come up with fresh rivalries, hopefully. That is why today I'm going to be answering the question in the title of this video: which WWE superstars should switch brands during the 2020 draft? So, without further delay, I'm the ultimate Nimrod, Steven, from the Hills Maniacs, and these are my predictions for the WWE Draft. Starting with SmackDown, here is who I think will be drafted.
And his name is John Cena!
No, not him. So, I'm going to start with Seth Rollins. I think, even though he's got that like Monday Night Messiah gimmick, I think moving him to Raw, he could maybe get into a feud with like Roman Reigns over the Universal title for a while, or go after the Intercontinental title, because honestly he's never fought AJ Styles before. I'd like to see him get into a feud with AJ Styles, and of course along with Rollins, because of his gimmick, you'd have to move Buddy Murphy with them. I mean, maybe, unless they end up splitting before then, but of course this is next Friday on SmackDown is when it starts, so anything could happen next Monday on Raw. But I think Rollins and Murphy could also be part of like the tag team division, because Lord knows WWE needs a tag teams on both brands. Honestly, I don't know why they have tag team titles if they're not really that into them, because they only have like 4 teams. So we always see the same matches. Speaking of which, Andrade, who's been fighting for the Raw tag team titles since 2008, is now going to be moving to SmackDown by himself. I think Angel Garza should be split from him. They're kind of teasing that on Raw anyways. I think it would be good for Andrade, go after like the Intercontinental title or something, him versus like Sami Zayn or Jeff Hardy or AJ Styles or whatever. I think that would be good for his character and everything else, and give him like a fresh coat of paint, so to speak. Because right now it's just he's been in the same feud all these months since like WrestleMania and everything, and it's been kind of annoying. And take him away from Raw, put him on SmackDown, which has been the much better show so far. I think we could see a lot more potential out of Andrade, and they can actually build him up as a bigger star by moving him there. Speaking of people who aren't that big of stars, Ricochet, who I'm sad to say is basically just a mid-carder on Raw at this point. He was in a tag team with Cedric Alexander, of course, till they moved till Cedric Alexander joined the Hurt Business. So now Ricochet's all by himself, teaming with like Ali and Apollo Crews and things like that in these pointless segments on Raw, instead of fighting for like the United States Championship or even the World Championship, which he should have been fighting for. He did get one WWE title match, but it was a squash match against Brock Lesnar, as I'm sure you all remember. Yeah, that was a long time ago, it feels like. But I think, like, same as with Andrade, I think moving him to SmackDown would be good for him. Let him fight for the Intercontinental title. This just adds so many layers to the Intercontinental title picture as well. Ricochet versus Sami Zayn, Jeff Hardy, AJ Styles, even Ricochet and Andrade could fight, or Murphy, whatever, like so many people fighting for the Intercontinental title. It makes it seem like a big deal, and instead of having him just basically not be on the show, because he has the potential to be a really big star. He should have been a big star when he came up from NXT. They gave him the U.S. title, and then they were like, nah, we don't see anything in you, so they gave up on him. So I think that giving him, putting him on the blue brand would probably be better for his character, and it takes him away from all the trash that is Monday Night Raw. Next up, I think upon her return from maternity leave, I think Becky Lynch would be good to go to SmackDown, because we saw her on Raw for like, I think it was probably 2 years now, because she was part of the main event of WrestleMania where she, fought against Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair, she was on Raw. She had both women's titles, and then she lost to SmackDown and stayed on Raw. So I think moving Becky back to SmackDown again would be a good idea, and then they can freshen up that women's division a little bit, because that is very stale. Other than the Bayley and Sasha stuff they've been doing, that's been really good, and Alexa Bliss, like basically with the Fiend now, and Nikki Cross there too. But adding Becky Lynch to all this might sort of heighten the women's division a little bit, bring attention back to it, because SmackDown's women's division is the equivalent of Raw's men's division. It is not good. Next up, the Viking Raiders, I think, would do good being moved to SmackDown. Now, of course, I'll talk about later on which teams I think will be switched from Raw to SmackDown. So there will still be tag teams on Raw and SmackDown. Just like I'm not moving every tag team from Raw to SmackDown to boost SmackDown's tag team division, but not have anybody on Raw. No, but I think upon return, I forget which one of them is injured, but I think the Viking Raiders should go to SmackDown because we haven't seen them on SmackDown yet. And I think they could feud with like Heavy Machinery or something, or Cesaro and Shinsuke, but whatever. Then that tag team division, there's not really many tag teams to feud with, so I don't know. I just think it would be like a fresh look at them on moving them to SmackDown now and everything. And who knows, they might be booked as a more dominant tag team than they were on Raw. Also, I think Samoa Joe should be moved to SmackDown as a wrestler, not as a commentator. Now, I know he seems to get injured a lot. That's probably why he's on commentary now. But I think putting him in like the feud with Roman Reigns, like I don't know if he's actually. I mean, I know he is Samoan, but he's not part of like the Anoa'i family with Roman Reigns. But I think that would still play into it, like that Samoan bloodline type story that they're doing right now with Roman and the Usos fighting over the Universal title. I think adding Samoa Joe to that would be like almost a legitimate threat. I mean, I know we saw a couple years ago Roman versus Samoa Joe in the main event of like Payback or Backlash or something, and it wasn't a very good match. But I think they could have a good match if put in the right hands and put on SmackDown. That's like a potential main event over the Universal title right there. On at least one pay-per-view, you have Roman win, it makes him look strong. Samoa Joe lost, but then he could go after the Intercontinental title too. We could get AJ Styles and Samoa Joe. There's sort of TNA rivalry going on, whatever. But I think it would be good for him. I don't want to see him on commentary much longer. I'd rather see him in the ring because he's awesome. But that's just me. I don't know if you guys like hearing him on commentary or not, but everyone has their opinion. Next up is Aleister Black. I don't know how they messed him up. They completely changed his character now. I mean, he's still kind of the same, but not. So moving him to SmackDown, I just want to see him feud with like AJ Styles or Sami Zayn. Like, I don't think we've ever seen that before. And a lot of these people I've been choosing, as you've noticed, have been part of the Intercontinental title division because I don't think like a lot of, especially at least right now with Roman as Universal Champion, I don't think a lot of these guys would stand a chance against Roman. Like, I don't want to see Aleister Black be in a squash match against Roman Reigns. I'd rather see like Roman versus Samoa Joe, like I said, or Roman versus Bray Wyatt first. And then once somebody else is WWE Champion, yeah, you have Aleister Black go after the title. But right now, I'd rather see him fighting for the Intercontinental title or winning the Intercontinental. He hasn't won a title yet on the main roster, I don't think. Not that I can recall. Unless he won the tag team titles. I don't remember. But I think that's kind of sad. So I think he needs something fresh for his, for his character, for his, like make his debut on SmackDown because he hasn't been there yet, and take the Intercontinental title from Sami Zayn. I'd personally love to see him kick Sami Zayn's head off, but that's just me. Next up, now this is where it gets interesting. I wanted to put Randy Orton on SmackDown because I think it would be cool to see him feuding with The Fiend, because they have that whole the history between him and Bray Wyatt, and The Fiend always targets people, for the most part, except Goldberg. The Fiend always targets people that have wronged Bray Wyatt in the past, and Randy Orton burned down Bray Wyatt's she-shed, so he should, The Fiend would want revenge for that. So I think having Randy versus The Fiend would be good. Either that, or I was even thinking if they have Randy on remain on Raw and actually win the Hell in a Cell match against Drew, which is probably what they're setting up for the WWE title. Then you have The Fiend drafted to Raw, then he can fight Randy for that title. But I'd rather honestly see it on SmackDown because I think Raw would screw up The Fiend, which they kind of already did. That's why he was moved to SmackDown. So Randy, and also I could see Randy Orton fighting Roman Reigns for a few, couple months or whatever too. He's a WWE champion material, so he would put up a fight against Roman Reigns during this whole like Roman heel run that we got going on. But Randy's also a heel, so I don't know how they would book that. But next up, now I dig into the NXT bag of tricks because I think that I think what they should do is split up the Undisputed Era amongst both Raw and SmackDown. So I think for SmackDown they should do Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly because they would fight for the tag team titles and maybe the Intercontinental title. They're both good singles athletes as well, but I was specifically thinking when I made this list that they should go for the SmackDown tag team titles. I think that would be like a genuine surprise, and it would be an actual like legitimate team as the tag team champions for the first time in a while. I think, at least on Smack, other than like New Day and stuff. But I think they would be good against like the Usos or New Day or any of them, and it would be nobody would have seen that coming that they were going to do that. And also I think again in the Intercontinental title picture, Johnny Gargano I think should come from NXT. I think it's time for them to be called up as much as I don't want them to because I know they're going to be ruined probably on the main roster by next month if they were brought up. But I think Johnny Gargano fight. I just want to see Johnny Gargano versus Daniel Bryan, to be honest. I don't know about you guys, but that's kind of a dream match of mine that I want to see because they have sort of similar fighting styles, and just especially with Johnny Gargano as a heel, I think it would be a good feud against Daniel Bryan as a face whenever Daniel Bryan returns. Also, he'd be fighting for the Intercontinental title. You got those dream matches like him versus AJ Styles and Jeff Hardy, Sami Zayn, all them that are basically in the Intercontinental title picture right now. And finally, with Johnny Gargano, you would bring over Candice LeRae, who could be a threat to the women's title for a while there. Hopefully they don't screw that up and actually have her in like the women's tag team division or something, because that's also not good right now. And now we'll move over to Monday Night Raw. I think Braun Strowman should move back to Raw just to kind of feud with Drew McIntyre for a little bit, to give Drew challengers other than like Randy Orton or Keith Lee. I was trying to think of also when I made this list like who would be threatening challengers for like the current champion, so like for Roman or for Drew. And Braun Strowman would be good, especially since he's kind of a heel now, because after his run in with the Fiend and everything, he's got this new attitude and stuff. He's back to the monster rather than like the buffoon running around and in comedy matches and stuff like that. I think it would be this time around. I think we have seen Drew versus Braun, but I think this time around it would be really cool to even see maybe Braun actually beats Drew for the title and walks around with the WWE title for a while, because he was Universal Champion and didn't really defend it that much other than against Bray Wyatt. So to see him in a feud with Drew McIntyre might really make people interested in Braun Strowman again and see him as a threat. Speaking of threats, I think Nikki Cross and Naomi should go to Raw. Not so much like Nikki Cross would be cool to see fighting Asuka for the Raw Women's title. Not so much Naomi, but I just think Naomi would get more of a spotlight maybe on Raw, or get screwed up just like everybody else. Because I don't think Raw is going to change even if they do bring people up to the main roster or bring them from SmackDown to Raw. I don't think that's going to matter, but still. But having Nikki Cross there to feud with, even if Becky Lynch did stay on Raw, have Nikki versus Becky. You can have Nikki Cross versus Asuka. So many different matches they can do there. And hopefully they would be really good matches if they did. I mean, we kind of saw that anyways with Nikki on Raw when she was part of the women's tag team with tag team champions with Alexa Bliss, but we didn't really get to see her on Raw as much. So having her as like a singles superstar, maybe even a heel on Raw would like kind of boost her up a little bit. Next up, I think The Miz should be moved to Raw and split from John Morrison. I think he's better as a singles athlete. Right now, it's kind of just a comedy act. And also, I say this because I want John Morrison to be fighting for the Intercontinental title again. He's really good in the ring, and like I said, in this version of it, the Intercontinental title is like really huge in my booking here. So having John Morrison versus Jeff Hardy again versus AJ Styles, those would be some really good matches. But right now, they just kind of have him in a pointless tag team with The Miz because they're not really fighting for the tag team titles right now. They're sort of going against Otis for the Money in the Bank briefcase, I guess. So having Miz move back to Raw, maybe feud with Drew McIntyre for a little bit, or I don't know, Dolph Ziggler again. I don't know, or fighting for the United States title, I guess, against the Hurt Business might. I don't know what they'd do with The Miz. I just don't want to see him with John Morrison anymore. And speaking of splitting tag teams, how about Cesaro and Shinsuke? I think Cesaro should be moved to Raw and split from Shinsuke so he can have a nice singles run. I'd like to see Cesaro versus Bobby Lashley, to be honest. But Cesaro versus anybody is a good singles match. I don't know why they decided to put him with Shinsuke as a tag team because it's pointless. But they are the SmackDown Tag Team Champions now, so either they'll lose the titles before next Friday or just split them, or split them up and take the titles from them, whatever. But then Shinsuke can also have a run again in the Intercontinental title division, and away from the tag team division, which I know does break up a tag team and they need a lot of those. But honestly, if WWE doesn't care about their tag team division, neither do I. Again, speaking of the tag team division, I think Big E should be split from New Day. I know it's kind of hard to hear, but they're sort of building Big E up as like a single star right now. So I think moving Big E up to Raw on his own and leaving Kofi and Xavier on SmackDown, they can go for the tag team titles still, and then Big E can be on Raw fighting against the Hurt Business or against Retribution if they were actually a threat. Fighting on Raw by himself, just like I guess he kind of used to when he was like he was sort of Dolph Ziggler's bodyguard when he first came up from NXT all those years ago. But seeing him now, like, he is really good in the ring on his own, just from what we've seen on SmackDown these past few weeks. So I think he would do really well on Raw, and hopefully they would book him. I would even pay to see him in a feud with Keith Lee, to be honest. It's just these two big dudes, fighting each other in the ring, and that would be entertaining, I think. Seeing Big E get thrown around by Keith Lee and then pulling out some big moves of his own. I don't know, that'd be like an interesting feud they could do. A guy can dream, right? And then, as I mentioned earlier, the splitting of the Undisputed Era. So now you put Adam Cole and Roderick Strong on Monday Night Raw, so that Adam Cole can fight for the WWE title against Drew McIntyre. Roderick Strong maybe go for the U.S. title, or even Adam and Roderick can go for the Raw Tag Team titles. Then you could have the potential at Survivor Series with Adam Cole and Roderick Strong as Raw Tag Team Champions against Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly of SmackDown. And then whoever the NXT Tag Team Champions are, if they included them at Survivor Series. So many potential things they could do. And also add Tommaso Ciampa to the mix. Putting him on Raw, he could be a threat to Drew McIntyre's title as well. We've seen what Tommaso Ciampa can do in NXT. So, I think that would be an awesome feud as well. Just any of these guys against like Drew McIntyre would be an instant classic, I think, if it was booked right. And finally, I'm going to end on, for the women's division, I think Rhea Ripley should be moved from NXT to Raw whenever she's done with whatever she's doing in NXT. Because she was already NXT Women's Champion, I'd kind of like to see her as Raw Women's Champion, see how long she would go. She could fight Shayna Baszler again, kind of get, play into the feud they had in NXT, that she forced Shayna out of NXT basically by beating her, stuff like that. So there's a lot of story there as well. And finally, as a bonus, I think King Corbin should be moved to main event because that's where he belongs. You know, the show that no one watches on WWE Network that is filmed before Monday Night Raw. That's where King Corbin should go. So there you have it, guys. Those were my picks for the 2020 WWE Draft. And what I want to see happen, which probably won't happen because in the crazy world of WWE, anything is possible and we barely ever get what we want. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments section, what your guys' picks are for this year's draft, who you want to see go where and why, and stay tuned to this channel because in a few weeks' time we're going to be doing a whole week of videos based on, or with like a Halloween theme, all sorts of different stuff. We'll be talking about Halloween movies and things like that. We're calling it Hallow Week. So stay tuned if you're into that sort of thing, and take care, everybody.